She really labeled it, for my second favorite child, in front of everyone. I tried to laugh, but it cracked in my throat. Mom beamed like she'd just won something. The whole table laughed, Daniel loudest, like my humiliation was dessert. But that wasn't the real betrayal. 2 weeks later, I found her will. Everything, house, savings, heirlooms, gone to Daniel. Not even a photo album for me. Nothing. Just a joke gift and erasure. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I took the card, wrote the date, and smiled. She gave me a book. So I wrote a better ending. Let's just say, second favorite doesn't look so small anymore. My name is Erin Whitaker, and I'm 45 years old. I spend my afternoons in my suburban kitchen, folding laundry and brewing cardamom tea, building a life far from my mother's constant praise of my brother Daniel. The steam rises as I sort warm towels, rehearsing the diplomatic phrases I'll need at next week's family dinner. Mom always treated Daniel like her son, from grade school assemblies where he collected ribbons while I held coats, right through to last month's backyard barbecue where she showcased his latest promotion. Thank goodness for Aunt Carol, my mother's sister and retired bookkeeper, who sees everything and keeps careful notes. What nobody realizes is that I inherited Carol's head for numbers and patient eye for detail. Something's shifting in our family's careful balance, and I feel it in my bones. But let me start from the beginning. 2 weeks later, I walked into Salvatore's, where Mom always insisted we celebrate birthdays. You know the type of place: white tablecloths, wine lists thick as novels, and waiters who hover like anxious butterflies. Daniel was already there, naturally, commanding the table like it was his personal boardroom. He'd ordered some fancy Cabernet that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "Erin, darling," Mom's voice carried across the restaurant as if she were announcing royalty. She wore her favorite pearl necklace, the one she always touched when she was about to deliver what she thought was a clever remark. We were just discussing Daniel's new development project. I slid into my seat, careful not to wrinkle my dress. The candlelight caught the edge of every knife and fork, making them look sharp enough to draw blood. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible on 5th. "Oh, that's because you took the wrong route," Daniel chimed in, swirling his wine. "If you'd gone through Highland Park like I always suggest—" "Speaking of suggestions," Mom interrupted, practically vibrating with excitement, "I have something special for you." She reached under the table and pulled out a gift wrapped in silver paper with a perfect blue bow. The kind of wrapping job you pay for at those fancy boutiques. Have you ever had that moment when your stomach drops before anything bad actually happens? Like your body knows something your brain hasn't caught up to yet? That's exactly how I felt when she pushed that package across the table. "Open it! Open it!" Mom clutched her pearls, nearly bouncing in her chair. Daniel leaned back, that familiar smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. The paper crinkled under my fingers as I carefully removed the ribbon. Inside was a baby book. You know, the kind where parents record their child's first steps, first words, all those precious moments. But this one was different. Right there on the cover, in Mom's precise blue handwriting, were the words, "For my second favorite child." The table erupted in laughter. Mom's came first and loudest, like she'd just delivered the punchline at a comedy club. Daniel's chuckle followed, deep and satisfied, while his wife Sarah gave one of those polite titters that people use when they're not sure if something's actually funny. I felt heat climb up my neck and into my cheeks. Across the table, Aunt Carol's jaw was clenched so tight I could see a muscle jumping in her cheek. Our eyes met for just a moment, and I saw 45 years of understanding pass between us. "Thank you, Mother," I said, measuring each word like I was dropping stones into a very deep well. "How thoughtful of you to remember me this way." My fingers found the card that came with it, and I slipped it into my purse. The date would matter later. It always does with things like this. The waiter appeared then, a welcome interruption, and I ordered the cheapest pasta on the menu. My appetite had vanished, but appearances matter in my family. We keep up appearances like some people keep up their gardens, constantly pruning, always on display. An hour later, I waved goodbye with a smile that felt like I'd been drinking aluminum. Mom was still laughing about her clever little joke as I walked to my car. The night air was cold enough to sting, but I barely noticed. The drive home was a blur. You ever notice how streetlights look when you're trying not to cry? They stretch and smear until they're just one long, cold stripe of light, like a finger pointing you home. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, knuckles white against the black leather. That book wasn't just a gift. It was a message, clear as day. Mom had finally said out loud what she'd been showing me my whole life. But something about seeing it written down, making it official, that changed things. I wasn't going to play the role of the grateful second best anymore, wasn't going to smile and nod while she carved me smaller and smaller. The book sat in my passenger seat like a ticking bomb, and somewhere in the back of my mind, a quiet voice whispered that this wasn't the end. It was just the ribbon on something much worse to come. 2 weeks after the birthday dinner, I was helping Mom sort through decades of paperwork for her upcoming move. You know how these things go. Every drawer's a time capsule. Every folder's got a story. The living room was thick with the smell of dust and that lemon oil she'd always used on the furniture, the same brand since I was a kid. "Aaron, could you start on those filing cabinets?" Mom called from the kitchen. Daniel's on the phone discussing the move logistics. Right on cue, my brother's voice boomed from her phone's speaker. "Mom, I've got the movers lined up for next month. Top-rated company, very exclusive." I tuned him out and focused on the task at hand. Have you ever noticed how paper feels different when it's important? There's something about the weight of it, the way it sits in your hands. That's how it felt when I opened that cream-colored envelope with Morrison & Associates Trust Services printed in the corner. The living room seemed to go quiet, like someone had pressed mute on the world. My fingers trembled just a bit as I unfolded the document. There it was in black and white. Mom's updated will. I scanned the paragraphs, my heart doing this weird skippy thing in my chest. But then everything went still when I hit the beneficiary section. Daniel. Just Daniel. Everything. The house, the investments, even her grandmother's antique jewelry collection. All of it going to him. There wasn't even a mention of me, not even for a family photo album or a piece of costume jewelry. The signatures at the bottom were fresh, dated just 3 days before my birthday dinner. That baby book hadn't been a random cruel joke. It had been a preview. "Mom?" I stood up, document in hand, and walked to the kitchen. She was leaning against the counter, still nodding along to Daniel's voice droning about moving truck dimensions. "Daniel, I need to go," she cut in smoothly. "Your sister needs something." I waited until she hung up. I found the will. Her face didn't change, not even a flicker of shame or discomfort. "Oh, well, yes, I had it updated recently. Daniel's better with financial matters, you know that." Better with financial matters? The words tasted like copper in my mouth. "Is that why you gave me that second favorite baby book? To soften me up for this complete erasure?" She sighed, like I was being dramatic about something as trivial as a paint color. "Aaron, Daniel knows how to take care of family. You've always chosen to be independent." She said it like independence was a character flaw. "This just makes things simpler." My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Aunt Carol. "Breathe, then plan." She must have sensed something was wrong. She always could. I looked at Mom standing there in her immaculate kitchen, everything labeled and organized just so, and suddenly saw myself through her eyes. An inconvenient daughter who hadn't played by her rules, who'd built a life outside her orbit. And now she was making it official, erasing me from that final piece of paper that said family. The will felt heavy in my hands as I folded it carefully along its original creases. My fingers moved deliberately as I pulled out my phone and added the date to my notes app. No emotion, just facts. Just evidence. Outside, dusk was settling in, and the house windows looked like a row of indifferent eyes watching me leave. I could feel everything I wanted to say burning in my throat. About fairness, about maternal love, about a lifetime of being measured against Daniel and coming up short. But I swallowed it all back. This wasn't the time for tears or accusations. Emotion would have to wait. Right now, evidence was the only language worth speaking. The next morning, I slid into a booth at May's Diner, where Aunt Carol was already waiting. She'd picked the quietest corner. That's how I knew this wasn't just going to be catching up over pancakes. You know those conversations that feel like turning points before they even start? This was one of them. "I ordered you coffee," she said, pushing a steaming mug toward me. "Real cream, no sugar. Some things never change." She smiled, but her eyes were serious behind her reading glasses. I'd always loved the smell of May's coffee. It reminded me of Sunday mornings when Dad was still alive, before Daniel became Mom's whole world. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug while Aunt Carol pulled out a yellow legal pad and uncapped her pen with purpose. "All right, honey," she said, writing the date at the top of the page. "Let's talk strategy, not emotion. We'll save that for later. Right now, we need to be methodical." My throat tightened. "I don't even know where to start. That's why I'm here." She drew a neat line down the middle of the page. "First rule of bookkeeping. Everything leaves a trail. We gather, we verify, we duplicate, and most importantly," she tapped her pen on the paper, "we timestamp everything." I pulled out my phone and started setting reminders. "Mom mentioned investment accounts last Christmas," I said, watching Aunt Carol's neat handwriting fill the page. "And there's the lake house account." Just then, Mom's ringtone cut through the diner's quiet morning buzz. I almost declined the call, but Aunt Carol's hand shot out to stop me. "Speaker," she mouthed. I pressed the button and Daniel's voice filled our corner. "Mom, great news." He sounded like he'd just won the lottery. "I've got everything lined up with the bank. All the account transfers will be finalized within 90 days. Clean and simple, just like we planned." My coffee turned to ice in my stomach. Aunt Carol's pen froze mid-word. "Oh, wonderful," Mom gushed. "I knew you'd handle everything perfectly, Daniel." The call ended with their usual Mutual Admiration Society meeting, but I barely heard it. 90 days. The clock was already ticking. Aunt Carol slid the legal pad toward me. At the top, I wrote 90 days in heavy block. Letters that dented the paper. My hands were steady now. Funny how a deadline can do that to you. "I need a calendar," I said, pulling out my laptop. "Weekly targets, maybe? Track everything he touches?" "Now you're thinking like a bookkeeper." Aunt Carol nodded approvingly. "Print 2 copies, one for each of us." The printer at May's was ancient and cost 50 cents a page, but I didn't care. I marked out 90 little boxes, then started, assigning tasks to each week. Bank statements, email records, phone logs, every time Mom had mentioned money or property over the past year. "Don't forget to document that baby book," Aunt Carol said quietly. "That second favorite business. It shows a pattern." She was right. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my new scanner, the good kind that creates searchable PDFs. I started with the recent stuff: bank notices, property tax, statements, utility bills. Everything went into a folder labeled Family Records 2023. The baby book was last. I photographed the inscription 3 times to make sure it was perfectly clear, then added it to the end of the file. Looking at those words again, "for my second favorite child," I felt that same birthday dinner humiliation. But this time, it hardened into something useful, a reminder of why I was doing this. Every account I documented felt like taking back a little piece of ground. Each file name I typed was another brick in the wall between me and erasure. The scanner hummed, my keyboard clicked, and somewhere in the distance, a clock was ticking down 90 days. The question wasn't whether I could stop Daniel anymore. The question was, how much evidence could I gather before time ran out? I started my hunt at 5 a.m. the next morning, before the sun could cast judgment. You know that quiet hour when the world feels empty enough to face anything? That's when I set up Command Central at my dining room table, laptop, scanner, and a coffee mug that would need plenty of refills. First stop, Mom's bank portal. She'd given me her password years ago for emergencies, though I'd never used it. Felt a bit dirty logging in now, if I'm being honest. But sometimes doing right means getting your hands a little messy, doesn't it? The transaction history loaded like a deck of cards being dealt, each one telling its own story. I noticed it right away. Withdrawals that marched across the screen in a steady rhythm. Always around the same dates Daniel claimed he was checking on investments in Phoenix or Sacramento. "Look at this," I told Aunt Carol over the phone. 5,000 here, 8,000 there. Always when he's supposedly out of town. "Map those trips," she said, that retired bookkeeper's instinct kicking in. Cross-reference everything. So I did. Created a spreadsheet that would have made my old accounting professor proud. Listed every withdrawal, every date Daniel mentioned traveling, every credit card charge. Started color-coding them like some detective in those crime shows my kids watch. You ever notice how patterns jump out when you're really looking? Daniel's business trips lined up perfectly with open houses in failing developments. His fancy lunch receipts matched dates of meetings with desperate developers trying to offload property. I called Mom's local bank branch, playing the concerned daughter. "Just routine statements," I said, voice casual as Sunday breakfast. "Making sure everything's in order for tax season." The clerk was chatty. Mentioned authorized signers. Guess whose name was on every account? Not mine, never mine. But Daniel's signature had authority over everything from the main checking to Mom's retirement fund. My hands shook a little as I typed up the summary. Had to backspace more than usual, keeping emotion out of it. Just facts, just numbers, dates, amounts, names. Every time that old hurt tried to surface, that lifetime of being second choice, I shoved it back down with another bullet point. $5,000 withdrawal, Phoenix trip, March 15th, $8,000. Withdrawal, Sacramento meeting, April 3rd. Developer lunch charge, $246. Same day as $10,000 transfer. Aunt Carol offered her spare room as a backup location. "Never keep all your eggs in one basket," she said, patting the manila envelope I brought her. Smart woman, my aunt. She'd seen enough family drama in her 70 years to know better than to trust in good intentions. The picture got clearer with each passing day. Money flowing out of Mom's accounts like water through a broken dam, all of it heading toward Daniel's real estate ventures. The same ventures he kept telling Mom were guaranteed returns and solid investments. I circled another suspicious transfer with my red pen. The amounts were getting bigger, bolder. 10,000 here, 15,000 there. All perfectly timed with property purchases in his company's name. Here's what killed me. It wasn't even clever. He wasn't trying to hide it because he didn't think he had to. Why bother covering your tracks when Mom would defend you even if she caught you with your hand in the cookie jar? My finger hovered over the bank's fraud department number. One call could start an avalanche. But timing mattered. Evidence mattered more. So I added another page to my growing file and kept digging. A thought hit me as I scanned another bank statement. How many other stones were left unturned? What other threads would unravel if I pulled just right? Ever try explaining basic math to someone who's already decided you're wrong? It's like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall, messy and pointless. But I had to try. For 3 days straight, I traced every dollar that left Mom's accounts and landed in Daniel's ventures. The pattern was so obvious it made my teeth hurt. You'd think he'd at least try to be subtle about it, but guess when you're the golden child, you don't bother covering your tracks. I spread everything out on my kitchen table, the same one where my kids did their homework, where we'd shared Sunday dinners, where real family stuff happened. The contrast wasn't lost on me. Remember those old math workbooks from school, the ones with the connect the dots puzzles? This was like that, except every dot was another withdrawal, and the picture it formed wasn't pretty. Daniel's development company looked impressive on paper. Glossy brochures showed artist renderings of luxury condos and strip malls that would revolutionize up-and-coming neighborhoods. But dig beneath the surface, which I did, believe me, and the numbers were bleeding red ink all over the place. "Keep it simple," Aunt Carol had advised over the phone. "Your mother's not a financial wizard, but she's not stupid. Show her the facts, nothing else. So I made a chart. Nothing fancy, just 3 columns. Date, amount, where it went. Every time Mom's account showed a withdrawal, I tracked where that money landed. Like following breadcrumbs, except these were $100 bills leading straight to Daniel's failing projects. I wrote and rewrote my opening lines on index cards, practicing in front of my bathroom mirror like I was giving a presentation at work. Mom, I need to show you something important. No, too dramatic. I found some concerning patterns. Better, but still not quite right. This is about protecting your future. That one felt honest without being accusatory. When I pulled into Mom's driveway that afternoon, the spring sun was doing its best to make everything look cheerful. Her porch was her favorite spot. White wicker furniture, potted geraniums that needed water, and a view of the neighborhood she'd lived in for 30 years. I'd picked this setting on purpose. Home turf, familiar ground, nothing threatening. "Would you like some iced tea?" she asked, as I settled into the chair across from her. Same chair I'd sat in countless times before, though it had never felt quite this hard. "No thanks, Mom." I pulled out my folder, carefully arranged the pages. "I need to talk to you about something important." The wind picked up just then, ruffling the corner of my carefully prepared chart. I weighted it down with my water glass, lined up the columns so they faced her. "What's all this?" She didn't reach for her reading glasses, which told me plenty. I kept my voice steady, just like I'd practiced. "These are withdrawals from your accounts over the past 18 months. I pointed to the first column. "And these," my finger slid right, "show where that money went." "Daniel handles all that," she said, waving her hand like she was shooing away a fly. "He knows what he's doing." I tapped the third column gently. "Mom, look at the pattern. Every withdrawal matches a deposit into his development projects that aren't doing well." Her eyes hardened then, like pond water freezing over. I recognized that look from childhood. It usually came right before she'd tell me how I'd disappointed her again. "This isn't about punishing anyone," I said quickly, the words I'd rehearsed tumbling out. "It's about protecting you, your retirement, your security." I took a breath. "All I'm asking is that you pause any new transfers until we can get some questions answered." The silence stretched between us like taffy, getting thinner and thinner until it had to break. I gripped the porch railing, waiting for something, anything. Understanding, denial, even anger would have been better than what came next. Her smile appeared slowly, brittle as old china. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, that promises something unpleasant is about to happen. And still, I waited, holding on to that railing like it could somehow anchor me against whatever was coming. The smile I'd been dreading twisted into something worse. Mother pushed my carefully prepared chart back across the table with just 2 fingers, like it was something dirty she'd found under the sink. "Oh, Erin," she sighed, managing to pack 45 years of disappointment into those 2 words. "Jealousy makes numbers dance." The air left my lungs like someone had punched me in the gut. You ever have one of those moments where everything suddenly becomes crystal clear? This was mine. Those numbers weren't just figures on a page, they were a mirror. And Mother? She'd rather break that mirror than see Daniel's reflection in it. "This isn't about jealousy," I said, but the words felt hollow even to me. What was the point? She'd already decided what this was about before I'd even opened my mouth. Thunder rumbled in the distance as I gathered my papers. Mother sat there, serene as a statue, probably already composing the phone call she'd make to Daniel about her dramatic, jealous daughter. The geraniums trembled in the wind, dropping red petals onto the porch floor like tiny accusations. I drove home through dusk, streetlights flickering on one by one. The box of copied documents sat in my passenger seat like an unwanted companion. Every stoplight gave me time to think. Dangerous thing, thinking. About how this fight could seep into everything. Missed deadlines at work because I was chasing paper trails, my kids picking up on the tension, friends getting tired of hearing about family drama. My kitchen felt too quiet when I finally got home. You know that kind of quiet that feels like it's waiting for something? I dropped into a chair at the table, pulled out my legal pad, the same one that had seemed so full of purpose just days ago. My pen hovered over the yellow paper before scratching out 3 words. Consider letting go. I stared at those words until they blurred together. The second favorite label from that damn baby book floated up in my mind, taunting me. Maybe that's all I'd ever be, the footnote in the family story, the eternal runner-up. Hell, maybe I should just accept it, let Daniel have his way. Wouldn't that be easier? Just fade into the background like Mother clearly wanted? Sleep came in fits and starts that night. Every time I dozed off, I'd jerk awake with some new, awful thought. By morning, my alarm felt like an insult. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone and the reminder about pulling more files from the bank. My finger hovered over the cancel button. Instead, I texted Aunt Carol, "Maybe this isn't worth it." Her response came back almost immediately, just one word: steady. That's Aunt Carol for you, always knowing exactly what to say, even if it's just one word. And somehow that single word was enough to get me moving. I got dressed, made coffee, grabbed my keys. But standing there in my kitchen, watching the morning sun try to break through heavy clouds, I felt something tap against my window. Looking closer, I realized it was the branch of my old maple tree, moving in a wind I couldn't feel yet, like it was warning me about something coming. I gripped my car keys tighter, feeling their edges dig into my palm. The dread that had been building since Mother's dismissal sat heavy in my stomach. But I turned the key in the ignition anyway. Sometimes duty looks a lot like stubbornness, doesn't it? And sometimes that's all you've got to go on. The file room at the bank waited for me, full of more papers, more numbers that Mother would probably say were just dancing to the tune of my jealousy. But Aunt Carol was right. Steady was the way forward, even if every step felt like walking through mud. You know those mornings where routine feels like a lifeline? That's where I was, clutching my coffee, swimming through bank statements like they could save me. Just another Thursday in the endless paper chase, right? The bank's fluorescent lights hummed overhead while I waited for Margaret, my regular clerk, to pull the latest batch of confirmations. The lobby smelled like always, coffee, paper, and that weird lemon cleaner they used on the desks. Funny how normal everything feels right before it. All changes. "Mrs. Whitaker?" Margaret called me over, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "These just came in. Want me to email copies too?" I nodded, already thinking about my filing system back home. My phone pinged with the incoming email while I was still standing there. But among the usual notifications, something stuck out. A subject line that made my coffee go cold in my hand. Notice: commercial loan agreement, Helen Whitaker, guarantor. Hold up. What commercial loan? My fingers trembled as I opened the PDF. There it was in black and white, a $500,000 business loan with Daniel's name as the borrower and Mother's as guarantor. The timestamp showed it had been misrouted to me instead of the actual Helen Whitaker. Some banker's mistake that just changed everything. "Margaret," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Could I get the conference room for an hour?" The small room felt like a bunker as I spread out the documents. Remember those old detective shows where they'd pin everything to a corkboard? That's what my brain was doing, connecting dots that had been floating around for weeks. I circled signatures, drew arrows between dates, matched withdrawal patterns. Every line I drew made the picture clearer and uglier. The dates were damning. 3 major withdrawals from Mother's accounts, lined up perfectly with the loan's collateral requirements. But here's the kicker. I'd been through every piece of paper in Mother's house during the move. Never saw a single mention of this loan. Not one. You ever have that moment where the floor seems to drop out from under you when something shifts from suspicious to serious? This wasn't just Daniel being careless with Mother's money anymore. This was, well, let's call it what it was. Fraud. My hands shook as I dialed Aunt Carol. She picked up on the first ring. "Carol? I found something." "Tell me," she said, her voice low and focused. I laid it out. The loan, the signatures, the missing paperwork, the timeline that couldn't be explained away by forgetfulness or sloppy bookkeeping. There was a long pause before she spoke. "This is the hinge, honey. Everything turns on this." She was right. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. This was about protecting Mother, whether she wanted protection or not. I created a new folder on my laptop. Loan, potential fraud. Started a fresh timeline, clinical and clean. No emotion, just facts. Dates, dollar amounts, document numbers. The kind of details that make lawyers sit up straight. Speaking of lawyers, I pulled up the will again, found the attorney's contact information, Douglas Wheeler, Esquerburn. My mouse hovered over the compose button for a full minute before I started typing the meeting request. Kept it simple. Urgent matter regarding Helen Whitaker's estate planning and recent financial arrangements. The reply came back fast. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. No going back now. I closed my laptop, feeling the weight of what I just set in motion. Took one deep breath, like Mom used to tell me to do before jumping into the deep end of the pool. Except this time, I wasn't sure how deep these waters went. "Ready?" Margaret asked from the doorway. She had another stack of papers in her hands, the next batch of statements I'd requested. I gathered my things, straightened my shoulders. The morning's discovery sat in my bag like a live wire, but my voice came out steady. "Yes, let's see what else we can find." I spread everything across my living room floor early the next morning, sorting papers into neat piles while my coffee went cold. You know that feeling when you're preparing for something big and your hands just know what to do? That's how it was, like muscle memory from all those years organizing files at work, except this time the stakes were personal. The morning light crept across my carpet as I assembled the dossier. Cover page, clean, professional, dated. Index. Every document listed chronologically with cross-references. Exhibits, labeled A through I, M, each one telling its part of the story. Have you ever noticed how numbers don't lie when you line them up right? They just sit there, patient and honest, waiting for someone to pay attention. I tabbed each section with those little plastic markers, blue for bank statements, yellow for withdrawal records, red for the loan documents. The colors reminded me of the filing system Mom taught me when I was 12, organizing her recipe cards. Funny how those small lessons stick with you. "Keep it simple," I muttered to myself, arranging the binders. "Just the facts." I rehearsed my presentation while I dressed for the meeting. No emotional words, no family history, no mention of birthday books or lifetime slights. Just what happened, how it showed in the papers, and what needed protection. The mirror reflected someone who looked more composed than I felt. The law office sat in one of those old converted houses downtown, all brick and careful landscaping. Inside, everything smelled like leather and lemon polish. The secretary, Amanda, according to her desk plate, led me to Mr. Wheeler's office. "Mrs. Whitaker," he stood to greet me, gesturing to a chair facing his desk. Diplomas lined the walls, and through his window, I could see a row of maple trees standing like sentinels. "What can I help you with today?" I placed my binder on his desk. "I've found some concerning financial arrangements involving my mother's accounts," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I've prepared a summary." He opened the binder, adjusting his reading glasses. I walked him through each tab, answering his questions with just enough detail. When he asked about dates, I had them. When he needed context, I provided it without commentary. "And this pattern of withdrawals," he said, pointing to my timeline. "You're certain about these dates?" "Bank verified," I replied. "The statements are in Exhibit C." I watched his face as he read, noting how his professional courtesy gradually shifted to something sharper, more focused. When he reached the loan documentation, his eyebrows lifted slightly. "One last item," I said, sliding the banker's notice across his desk. "This was accidentally sent to me yesterday morning." He picked up the paper, and I saw, the exact moment everything clicked. His posture changed, spine straightening, shoulders squaring. The polite attorney disappeared, replaced by someone who spotted serious trouble. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, placing the notice carefully on top of the open binder. "I'll need to take immediate action on this. We'll start with a freeze on your mother's accounts and a formal inquiry into this loan arrangement." I nodded, my throat tight. "How soon?" Today, he said, reaching for his phone. I'll call you as soon as I have anything concrete. The drive home felt surreal. I sat in my parked car in the driveway, both hands on the steering wheel, watching the dashboard clock tick forward. 1:47 p.m. 43 days left until Daniel's 90-day deadline. My phone sat silent on the passenger seat. The call from Wheeler could come any minute, the one that might change everything. I thought about Mother, about Daniel, about how this quiet afternoon might be the last peaceful moment before the storm broke. The maple trees in my front yard swayed gently, their shadows dancing across the hood of my car. 1:48 p.m. My hands stayed on the wheel, steady now, waiting for whatever came next. The next day crawled by like honey in winter. You know that feeling when you're waiting for news that could change everything? Every phone buzz made my heart jump until finally, at noon, Wheeler's number lit up my screen. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, his voice carrying the crisp certainty I needed. The emergency motions were granted this morning. We've secured temporary freezes on all the accounts we identified. My pen hovered over the legal pad. All of them? Every single one, he confirmed. We've also served notices to every financial institution where we found your brother's involvement. No, transfers can proceed without court review. I wrote each point in careful letters, pressing maybe a little harder than necessary. The yellow paper held every word like a promise. Emergency motions granted, accounts frozen, notices served. My hand shook slightly as I underlined the last note. What happens next? I asked. The court will schedule hearings, Wheeler explained. But the important thing is that your mother's assets are protected now. Nothing can be moved without proper oversight. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at those 3 lines of notes. The tension I'd been carrying for weeks began to loosen, like a knot finally working itself free. I took my first real breath in what felt like forever. Remember when you were a kid and you'd hold your breath underwater until your lungs burned? Coming up for air felt like this, sharp and sweet and almost painful. I pressed my palms flat against the cool wood of the table, anchoring myself in the moment. I called Aunt Carol next. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. The freezes are in place, I told her. Wheeler got everything through this morning. Good, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Now hold the line. What do you mean? This is when it gets harder, she explained. Your mother's going to react. Daniel's going to push back. You need to stay steady. She was right, of course. I could already picture Mother's face when she found out. That particular look she got when reality didn't match her script. The one that started with disbelief and hardened into anger. The same look she'd given me at piano recitals when I missed notes, at graduation when I chose the wrong college, at my wedding when I picked simple flowers instead of her suggested arrangements. The afternoon sun slanted through my kitchen window, warming the tiles beneath my feet. I needed to move, to work off this nervous energy before it crystallized into something else. Grabbing my house key, I headed out for my usual neighborhood loop. The late-day light painted everything in soft gold as I walked, past the Schmidt's place with their eternally optimistic tomato plants, around the corner where Mrs. Henderson's wind chimes sang their gentle chaos, up the slight hill that always made my calves burn just a little. This is about protection, I whispered to myself, letting my feet find their rhythm. Not punishment. I repeated it like a mantra. Protection, not punishment. Protection, not punishment. The temptation to feel triumphant tugged at me. Wouldn't it be satisfying to see Daniel's face when he realized his house of cards was falling? To watch Mother finally confront the truth about her golden boy? Protection, I said again, louder this time, not punishment. The sky was turning purple at the edges when I made it back home. My answering machine's red light blinked in the dim entryway. One new message. I pressed play, and Mother's voice filled the room, cold as January frost. What have you done? 3 words. That's all. But they carried decades of disappointment, judgment, and something else. Fear, maybe? I pressed play again, just to be sure I'd heard it right. Same 3 words, same Arctic tone. My hand rested on the machine, finger hovering over the button for a third play. But I pulled back. I already knew what came next would be either a bridge or a bomb. There wouldn't be any middle ground this time. 2 days after Mother's voicemail, I sat in Wheeler's office watching her flip through the evidence binder. You know that silence that comes right before a storm? That's what it felt like in there, heavy and electric. The leather chairs creaked whenever anyone shifted, and even the wall clock seemed to tick extra loud. Mother hadn't said a word to me when she arrived, just nodded stiffly and took the seat furthest from mine. Her pearl necklace, the one she always wore to serious occasions, caught the morning light from Wheeler's window. "Mrs. Whitaker," Wheeler began, her voice steady and professional, "I need to walk you through what we've uncovered. Some of this will be difficult to hear." I studied my hands in my lap, fighting the urge to jump in and explain everything myself. But Wheeler had been clear. Let her handle the presentation. Keep emotion out of it. "These are bank records showing transfers from your primary accounts," Wheeler continued, turning to the first tab. "Each withdrawal corresponds to deposits into your son's development project." Mother's spine straightened slightly. I could almost hear her preparing the usual defense. Daniel's business acumen, his expert handling of family resources. But Wheeler didn't pause for commentary. "The pattern establishes a clear timeline," she said, flipping to the next section. "But what concerns us most is this." She pulled out the guarantor loan documentation, spreading the pages, across her desk. "Your name was used to secure a significant commercial loan. The signature here," she pointed to the bottom of the page. "Can you confirm whether you authorized this?" The room went so quiet, I could hear the traffic 6 stories below. Mother leaned forward, squinting at the signature. Her hand went to her throat, fingers touching those pearls like they were a lifeline. I never signed this," she whispered. The words seemed to surprise her as much as they did me. Wheeler nodded slowly. "That's what we suspected. There are several other documents we need to review, all bearing similar signatures." Remember when I said I wasn't here for punishment? That moment tested my resolve like nothing else. Watching Mother's carefully constructed reality crack right down the middle, it would have been so easy to twist that knife. Instead, I kept my mouth shut and my eyes on the carpet pattern. Wheeler walked through the rest methodically. Timeline of transfers, projected losses, potential legal exposure. Mother sat perfectly still through it all, only moving to turn pages when directed. But when we reached the final exhibit, copies of Daniel's signatures on various documents, her face just drained, like someone had pulled a plug and let all the color run out. I couldn't help myself then. "Mom," I said softly, "this was only ever about keeping things safe. That's all." She didn't look at me, didn't look at anyone, just stared at those signatures like they were written in a language she'd never seen before. When the meeting ended, I left first. Not because I wanted to avoid Mother, but because I couldn't bear to watch her try to put her shield back up. Some victories don't need witnesses. Outside, I found a spot under a huge maple tree and let myself shake for a minute. The morning was warm, but I felt chilled straight through. My phone buzzed twice in quick succession. The first message was from Standard Build Supply. "Due to concerns regarding project viability and pending investigations, we must terminate our contract with Whitaker Development effective immediately." The second came from someone at the Herald. "Seeking comment on allegations of financial impropriety regarding Whitaker Development's funding sources. Please respond by 3 p.m. today." I took screenshots of both messages, created a new folder labeled Aftermath, and filed them away. The metallic taste of victory filled my mouth, sharp and bright like a new penny. But underneath it was something else. Fear. Because I knew Daniel well enough to know what happened when his walls closed in, and those walls were definitely moving now. Standing under that maple tree, watching its leaves dance in the morning breeze, I realized we'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The truth was out there now, running wild and touching everything in its path. The dominoes started falling on a Tuesday morning. I was watering my houseplants when the first news alert popped up on my phone. Local developer faces multiple investigations. You know that moment when you've been holding your breath so long you forgot you were doing it? That's how it felt, finally seeing it in black and white. I sat down at my kitchen table, same spot where I'd pieced together all those bank statements weeks ago, and started a new document. Timeline, Phase 2, I typed at the top. Below it, I logged the first headline with the date and time. Little did I know I'd be updating that file every few hours for the next 7 days. By Wednesday, Daniel's primary lender had frozen his business accounts. Thursday morning, Standard Build's contract termination hit the business wire, and 3 other suppliers followed suit before lunch. You ever watch those cooking shows where they line up dominoes made of cookies or something? It was like that, but with Daniel's carefully stacked reputation instead of treats. Forward everything related to the loan documents, Wheeler's office requested. I did, keeping copies in my own files. No editorial comments, no personal notes, just facts, dates, and official correspondence. The less emotion I attached to each piece, the steadier my hands stayed on the keyboard. Remember Mother's bridge circle? Those ladies who used to coo over Daniel's Christmas cards and brag about his latest ventures? Aunt Carol told me they'd gotten awfully quiet at their weekly game. Margaret asked if anyone had heard the full story, she reported. Your mother just stared at her cards. The country club crowd shifted too. Folks who used to laugh at Daniel's jokes and angle for investment tips now crossed the street to avoid small talk. Amazing how fast a golden boy's shine can tarnish when the right light hits it. Every night, I'd send Aunt Carol the day's update. 3 more contractors pulled out. Second bank reviewing all transactions. Real estate board requesting documentation. Her responses were always the same. Stay steady, keep breathing. You know what's funny? I kept thinking about that birthday dinner, the way the candlelight had caught the ribbon on that damn baby book, how Mother's laugh had bounced off the wine glasses when I opened it. The memory still stung, but more like a healing bruise now, tender when pressed, but fading at the edges. Friday afternoon, Wheeler's office sent the confirmation I'd been both dreading and expecting. The state had opened a formal investigation into the loan fraud. Multiple counts, potential criminal charges. I wrote double loss incoming on my legal pad and underlined it twice. Mother's money was safe now, but her son, well, that protection had come with a price tag. My rosebush needed attention, the one right outside my kitchen window that I'd planted the spring before all this started. As I watered it, I noticed new growth pushing through, despite the late season. Stubborn little thing, determined to bloom even when the timing wasn't perfect. That's when I knew what to do with the baby book. It had been sitting in my desk drawer since that birthday dinner, its blue inscription still neat and sharp, for my second favorite child. I went inside, took it out, and really looked at it for the first time since that night. The cover was glossy, expensive. Mother never did anything halfway when it came to making a point. The sun was setting when Daniel's name finally popped up on my phone. 1 new voicemail. I watched the notification blink but didn't press play. Some messages don't need to be heard to be understood. I carried the book outside and found a spot near the rosebush's roots. The soil was still loose from watering, dark and rich between my fingers. I dug a small hole, deep enough that the book would stay buried even after heavy rain. Before I covered it, I took one last look at that inscription. Funny how something could feel so heavy and so light at the same time. Dawn painted the sky in watercolors as I stepped into my backyard, the baby book wrapped in its original ribbon. You know that special quiet that comes with sunrise, when even the birds are just warming up their voices? That's what surrounded me, just the soft hiss of my neighbor's sprinkler, marking time. The grass was still damp with dew as I made my way to the rosebush, the strongest one in my garden. I'd planted it 3 springs ago, and despite every challenge, late frosts, Japanese beetles, that brutal drought last summer, it kept reaching higher, kind of like someone else I knew. I knelt beside it, feeling the moisture seep through my jeans. The morning air carried that earthy smell that comes right before things start growing. Again, my garden trowel cut clean lines in the soil, a perfect square, just deep enough. Somehow it felt right to be precise about this, to give this moment the same careful attention I'd given all those spreadsheets and bank statements. Remember how beautifully Mother had wrapped this book? The ribbon was still crisp, barely wrinkled despite everything that had happened since that birthday dinner. I ran my thumb over the blue inscription one last time, for my second favorite child. The words didn't sting anymore. They just felt small and far away, like looking at an old photograph of someone you used to be. I laid the book in its new bed and started covering it with soil. Each handful felt like closing a chapter, burying not just a book, but all those years of standing in shadows, holding coats at assemblies, watching Daniel's name top every list. From the corner of my eye, I caught movement, a cardinal landing on my fence post, his red feathers bright against the pale morning sky. He tilted his head as if checking my work. Near the rose bush sat a stone I'd picked up on my last walk, smooth and flat, just right for marking spots in gardens. I placed it carefully over where the book lay, then sat back on my heels. My hands were dirty, but my mind felt clean. My phone buzzed. The final update I'd been waiting for. Daniel's venture had officially failed, assets seized pending investigation. The industry group, those folks who'd once treated him like their golden boy, they'd revoked his membership. Public censure. In their world, that's like slamming every door and nailing it shut. I let both pieces of news settle, the legal hammer and the social exile. Took a deep breath of morning air. Part of me had wondered if I'd feel triumphant when this moment came, but instead, I just felt steady, like when you finally set down something heavy you've been carrying too long. I snapped a quick photo of the stone and sent it to Aunt Carol. She'd understand what it meant without needing words. Then I opened a new message to Mother. The protection worked. Your money is safe. Simple, true, nothing more needed saying. Standing up, I brushed the dirt from my knees. My hands were stained with garden soil, but my face felt calm, peaceful even. The sprinkler next door had stopped, leaving just the sound of waking birds. The rosebush stretched toward the strengthening sunlight, its stems sturdy and straight. You know what I realized, standing there? All those years of being labeled second hadn't made me small. They'd made me patient, thorough, resilient, like that rosebush growing stronger through every season. I touched the smooth stone one last time and said it out loud, my voice clear in the morning quiet. Being second never meant being small. The words hung in the air for a moment, then settled into the earth like truth finding its home. Behind me, the sun cleared the horizon, casting my shadow long across the garden, not a small shadow at all.